Hi, you guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. Today, I'm going to be talking about an extremely intense full moon we have coming up here on Thursday, October 17th. The full moon peaks at 4:26 a.m. Pacific time, and it takes place in the sign of Aries. The full moon is at 24 degrees Aries. Now, the reason I'm using the word intense, I mean, sure, the sign of Aries can be a little intense, but it's really the aspects that we are receiving through the full moon energy. When I say aspects, I'm talking about basically conversations that are going on between those celestial bodies. We're talking about a T square. We're talking about a grand cross. Actually, there's two T squares, a grand cross. There's just some very, very harsh cardinal energy coming through. When I say cardinal, what I'm talking about is the cardinal signs, which come with a lot of force. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm basically going to break down how we can work with this energy. How can we benefit from this kind of transit? How can we flow through this kind of transit with grace? Okay. So first, what I'll do is I'm going to break down the sign of Aries for you, because really this is still the peak of a growth cycle. Okay, a growth cycle that began approximately 6 months ago when we had a new moon in the sign of Aries. That was the beginning of the growth cycle. Over these 6 months, we've all experienced this opportunity for growth that's related to the sign of Aries, and this is definitely a time to be honoring that growth. Okay, we're talking about the warrior of the zodiac. But this is also time, as soon as that moon begins to wane, it's time to let go, let that stuff flush out that does not serve you, that's related to the sign of Aries. Okay, so first I will break down the sign of Aries for you in detail. Then I'm going to pull up the chart. I'm going to show you these very, very prominent aspects that are coming from this full moon. And not only that, but it's almost an eclipse. I'll break down. It's not a full eclipse. It's not really even considered an eclipse, but it's close to being an eclipse. Okay, so we'll get into that. I will also be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Aries, because these parts of our body become more sensitive really anytime anything up in the sky transits to the sign of Aries. And for this full moon, of course, we've got the moon, but we've also got the North Node and we've got Chiron. So it's a good idea to pay a little extra attention to these parts of our body. So of course, I will be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body. And I will also be talking about gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Aries. I think I'm also mostly going to focus on protective stones for this transit. Okay, so let's get into this. The sign of Aries is what we call the cardinal fire sign. Okay, cardinal means it comes through with force. Okay, all the cardinal signs, Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, and Libra, they all come through when we enter into a new season. It's like the force that projects us into new energy. Now, in the element of fire, okay, fire, all the fire signs are very strongly associated with just energy. So we're talking about forceful energy with the sign of Aries being ruled by Mars. Okay, Mars is often referred to as the planet of war. Okay, now that makes Mars sound kind of bad. We need Mars. We love Mars. Mars is what rules our muscles. Mars is what makes us go take action. Mars rules our adrenal glands. Okay, but Mars influences things that are of an aggressive or dominant nature. Okay, the sign of Aries, not saying by any means, I know plenty of very chill Aries out there. Actually, know some shy Aries, because there's so many other things that can come in and if your sun is in Aries, it doesn't mean you're going to be aggressive or dominant, because there's things that can modify it in the natal chart. But the sign of Aries in and of itself, it's quite aggressive. Okay. Now, also the sign of Aries, it's like the pioneer. It's the first sign of the zodiac. Okay. It's the self starter. It's represented by the ram. Okay. The ram that will ram whatever is in its way. I used to work on a farm with some rams, and I realized that those animals can be quite aggressive. Wonderful, beautiful animals, but they can be pretty gnarly. Okay. Now, the motto for the sign of Aries is I am. Okay, again, being the first sign of the zodiac. It's like the infant of the zodiac, which is what I mean by that pioneer, the self-starter. A lot of times Aries people, and again, not just talking about if your sun is in Aries, if your Mars is in Aries, especially if you're like an Aries sun and Aries rising, or say you have Aries rising and Mars was on the horizon when you were born, that sort of thing. These people, it's like they just can go without thinking about repercussions. In fact, the sign of Aries is very strongly associated with things like accidents because it's the sign that will just, when it's got to go, it's got to go. Okay. Now, again, please understand, I'm not saying I've got an Aries in my family that's actually quite timid and quite shy because, and I've got a really good friend who's an Aries who's like the most chill, relaxed person in the world. But a lot of that depends on the rising sign and that sort of thing. But when we think about this sign of Aries in and of itself, it is the aggressor of the zodiac. It's courageous. Again, it's the warrior. Now, how have you grown in these ways? You know, we are definitely living in a time where I do think people really need to stand in their power. People need to be able to, and this is something I'm working on myself. I actually got quite a bit of Aries energy in my natal chart, which is interesting. Being a Pisces with a ton of Aries energy is quite an interesting combination. But the sign of Aries, it's, you know, if we're stepping into being able to take command, being able to step into something, being able to be the pioneers, being the I am. And what are you? You know, what are you? Being able to step into your own warrior type of energy. How have you grown in these ways? Now, also take this into consideration. Where does the sign of Aries come through your own natal chart? If you're using the whole sign house system, you just look to see what house the sign of Aries comes through in your natal chart. That's what I like working with when I'm looking with the lunar transit specifically. But if you're using Placidus, which I know a lot of people do, then you're going to want to see where 24 degrees Aries comes through your natal chart. Where is this coming through? Is it coming through your house of career, your house of self, your house of karma, your house of transformation, your house of communication? Maybe it's coming through your house of physical health. And you've really, especially since Chiron's going through Aries, it's like maybe you've been on this journey to be a warrior to take care of your own physical health. There's so many ways that this could be coming through your own as a collective. This is, we all receive this Aries energy, but it's also so incredibly unique to each and every one of us. Not only that, but do you have anything in your natal chart near, say, between like, I don't know, 21 to 27 degrees Aries, or really between 21 and 27 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, or Aries, because there's so much energy coming through these cardinal signs right now. Okay, so be thinking about that. How have you grown in these ways? But also, for some of us out there, maybe we need to let go of some of that. Like I said, the sign of Aries is very strongly associated with accidents. In fact, you'll find a lot of Aries children. I'll get into this a little further in the recording. I'll go into more depth, but Aries actually rules the top of the head, like the brain. And you'll notice a lot of Aries children will end up having some kind of a big, they fall down and hit their head as children, that sort of thing, or even as adults, but it tends to happen as children for people who are born under the sign of Aries. Okay, so maybe you need to be a little bit more strategic about going into whatever you're trying to take action with, that sort of thing. So be thinking about that. How have you grown in these ways? And not only that, but is there anything you need to let go of that's related to this sign of Aries? Okay, so let's pull up the chart. This is what I'm actually really excited to talk about here. Okay, so for those of you who are new to my recordings, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this full moon. Okay, now with geocentric, that means we put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. These things right here are the symbols for all the planets and the celestial bodies. Like here's Mars, here's something called the South Node, here's the Sun, here's Mercury, here's Venus. And when we go in the wheel just a little ways, these things are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these planets and celestial bodies will be beaming through at the time of this full moon. Okay, now this right here is the moon. This right here is the sun. Okay, now every single time we have a full moon, it means the sun and the moon are exactly opposite each other. Okay, so here we have the moon at 24 degrees, 35 minutes Aries. Here we have the sun at 24 degrees, 35 minutes Libra. Okay, and happy solar return to all you Libras out there. But those are cardinal signs. Okay, now we've got the sun beaming through that sign of Libra, which Libra is actually pretty chill and relaxed. And Libra's, even though it's a cardinal sign, as I've said so many times before, the sign of Libra, the way that I see the cardinal force come through with the sign of Libra is because they go out and they introduce themselves to people, and it's never really in an aggressive way, but the sign of Libra has a good force. It's really like the sign of sharing your energy with somebody else. In fact, going back to that, this being the sign of Aries, this being the sign of Libra. Aries is the sign of self. Libra is the sign of partnerships. Okay. Now, part of the reason this is almost an eclipse is because we just had last full moon, we had a lunar eclipse. But this right here is the moon, and this right here is the north node. Generally speaking, when we have a full moon and either the north or the south node is in the same zodiac sign as the moon, then that's what makes it an eclipse. But we already had the lunar eclipse, so they're maybe a little too far apart for this to be really considered an eclipse, but it's almost an eclipse, okay? That north node is what pumps energy in, okay? That north node is coming through 6 degrees Aries. You have anything in your natal chart now near 6 degrees Aries? Because if so, that north node is pumping this Aries energy onto that thing that you've got at near 6 degrees Aries in your natal chart. Okay, now also you'll notice this right here is Chiron, which is very, very close to this full moon. In fact, the moon is going to transit right over Chiron in the hours leading up to the peak of this full moon. Now, Chiron is what we call the wounded healer. Okay, Chiron has so much to do with healing our wounds from early childhood development. It is said that those wounds come from previous lifetimes. Okay, so, and going through the sign of Aries, a lot of people have been on their own self-healing journey, which being the warrior, like stepping into, hey, I'm going to heal this thing myself. And I'm somebody who's very, very familiar with such things. Many, many years ago, I guess it's been about 10 years since that. I don't know. Some of you guys might even know this, might not know this about me, but there's about 10 years ago. Yeah, about 10, 11 years ago, something like that. My entire face looked like I had two cantaloupes growing out each side of my face. Okay. It was basically, to sum this up, it was basically a blood disorder. It was a combination of fungus and virus and all kinds of nasty things coming through. And doctors were making it worse. Doctors were making it worse for me. Not saying that all doctors are bad, but every doctor I went to was giving me some sort of a prescription that was awful. And I healed myself, okay, through listening to a lot of really, really great teachers through my healing journey. Okay, so that's something I'm going to be taking into consideration for this full moon, even though it's been a lot more than the last 6 months that I've gone on that healing journey. It's still something I'm going to honor, that growth, because, and we all should. I mean, I feel like at least most of my own listeners, certainly not everybody in the world, but I feel like a lot of my listeners and friends and family and loved ones have really stepped into this, have really stepped into their own self-healing journey. This is absolutely a time to be honoring that growth. Okay, now let's first talk about this T-square that's going over to Mars. All right, so here's Mars, which is, again, the ruler of Aries. And Mars, again, the one that's referred to as the planet of war. In fact, if you even just look over here, let's see if I can stretch this out a little bit so I can show you guys what I'm talking about over here. If you look at this, we do have a grand trine. I will point that out, but we've got the grand cross. We've got a T-square to Mars, a T-square to the sun, T-square to Pluto, T-square to the moon. Okay, that's a T-square is when we have two opposing celestial bodies, like we've got the sun and the moon opposing each other. But then when we've got a planet or celestial body that is a square, okay, that's what these red lines are. Those are approximately a 90-degree angle. Okay, now one square is considered kind of a challenging aspect. One opposition is considered kind of a challenging aspect. So when we've got an opposition and a square up to here and a square over here, that is what makes this a T-square. And it's very well recognized as kind of a stressful combination of aspects, especially when they are in cardinal signs. Aries is cardinal, the sign of Cancer is cardinal, the sign of Libra is cardinal, okay? Now, and not only that, but again, this is Mars. And Mars is kind of like the Lord or the ruler of this full moon, because the full moon's in the sign of Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars. If you look over here again, Mars is in the sign of Cancer. the moon is what rules the sign of Cancer. So this is a very strong connection that is going on between really Chiron and the moon over to Mars, the aggressor, okay, and then down here to the sun, which the sun is like our source of energy, okay? The moon is really what rules our emotions and our feelings and our moods and our level of receptivity. When we have any kind of a full moon, people tend to be a little more sensitive towards each other's sometimes it's in a beautiful way, but a lot of times it's like if somebody else is in a cruddy mood and it's full moon and you're somewhere near them, some of that cruddy mood could very easily come onto you, especially with this kind of aspect here. But the good thing is, a lot of times, okay, so when somebody's born in their natal chart, if they've got T-squares in their natal chart, they will end up being really good problem solvers because there's a lot of stressful things that go on in their life. And it's almost like they have to build a way to get out of that. They have to use this like step stool here, this combination of the squares to build their way out of the stressful situations. Okay. Now, again, this can be a lot, especially if you've got anything, say again, between like, we can even honestly go anywhere between 20 degrees all the way up to 29 degrees of Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, or Libra. And the reason I say that, when we get down to Pluto, I'll talk about that. But Pluto's at 29 degrees in this cardinal sign of Capricorn. So, but especially if you've got something, say, between 21 and 27 degrees of Aries, Libra, or Cancer, or again, Capricorn as well. There's a lot of very strong energy coming through here. This would be a great time. If you've never pulled up your natal chart before, I highly recommend doing that, because then you can see, how is this going to be a stressful time for me? But it's so important, again, to be focusing on how have we grown in these ways and what do we want to let go of that's related to this kind of energy. Okay, so there's that. Now, I guess we'll just might as well jump on over here to talk about Pluto. So Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, Pluto is the ruler of the underworld. Pluto is aggressive. Pluto is very dominant as well. Okay, Pluto is really what influences, it's usually like a powerful yet painful transformational process. Okay, what Pluto does is he takes us down into the underworld and shows us the dark, shadowy stuff, the stuff that, it's exposing us to stuff that can be painful. Sometimes when somebody hits like a rock bottom time in their life, whether it be drug addiction or whatever it is, a rock bottom experience, it's because they're having some kind of a heavy Pluto transit. In fact, that celebrity, that hip hop celebrity, Mr. P. Diddy, he's having a very, very strong Pluto transit right now. But that can take us, it's like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And we go through a transformational process. I don't have a lot of faith that P. Diddy's necessarily going to go through a transformational process and come out, enlightened on the other side. I don't have any faith that would happen with P. Diddy, but what I'm talking about here is your average normal person. When we go through a rock bottom experience, but then we take it, elevate ourselves through it. We go through the transformational process. We pull ourselves out of that dark scariness, and we're empowered through that kind of experience. That is what Pluto influences. Now, of course, we're always experiencing Pluto. It's not like Pluto ever goes, well, none of these things ever go away, but there's certain times in our life where they're going to be stronger. Okay. And if you've got anything near 29 degrees Capricorn, I mean, you've been going through this for years now because Pluto moves so slowly. And I'm also going to talk about the aspects going between Pluto and Neptune and Uranus. My goodness, it is really strong stuff going on here. But that is another T-square here. Okay. It's like Pluto, that one's not quite as strong. It's approaching, it will be exact. The moon's going to move along here just hours after this full moon peaks, the moon will then be at 29 degrees Aries and will make an exact square to Pluto. And approximately 4 or 5 days after this full moon, the sun will hit 29 degrees Libra, and that will make an exact opposite square with Pluto. So that's really strong stuff going on here. And not only that, but here we have this opposition here between Pluto and Mars, and that is going on for quite some time. That's really going on all the way until the elections, okay? And so think about what Mars does. Mars is aggressive and dominant. Okay. And then Pluto, ruler of the underworld. And these guys are opposing each other in cardinal signs. It's basically all the way to like November 5th. That these guys are making this very strong opposition. It's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger as Mars moves forward. And that is very intense energy. Again, especially for that aspect right there, I'm going to go with, if you got anything between 27 and 29 degrees Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, or Libra, then it's really strong stuff coming through for you guys. Okay, so might be a good time for an astrology reading if you are experiencing that sort of transit, because that's heavy stuff, man. That's really heavy stuff. Okay, so there's that. I don't want to scare anybody at all. There's obviously, I don't know if you guys are following what's going on in North Carolina, the western side of North Carolina, but it is absolutely devastating. And from my understanding, what I've been following is stuff through like Telegram and Instagram, actual people, humans who live there, and how devastating it is. Some of them are saying that they're very well in days, months to come, we may discover that there was thousands of people who lost their lives. Okay, thousands. The news is saying it's like over 200, just over 200, which I don't believe. I really do encourage people to not get your news from the news. Okay, but there really is some in fact, if you remember the past couple videos that I made, I talked about water. I talked about, being near big bodies of water and that sort of thing. You might want to be careful because, well, we'll get into that as well. I mean, a lot of that has to do with this Pluto retrograde at 29 degrees, but it's also got to do with, I'm trying to decide if I should get into this right now. I'm kind of all over the map here, but just follow along as best as you can. Okay, here's Neptune going through the sign of Pisces, which Neptune is the god of the sea. Okay, and rules the sign of Pisces. Works beautifully there, but is in the sign of Pisces and in retrograde and making this very, very strong. And this is going to go on for kind of even all the way. It's going to go off and on and off and on, kind of through most of 2025. This connection between Pluto and Neptune here. And okay, so again, the god of the sea, Neptune, going through his own zodiac sign in retrograde, making an opportunistic connection with Pluto, but it's still, Pluto's so aggressive, okay? And then we've got Uranus up here, which is also, Neptune's right in the midpoint between, here's Uranus. Uranus is abrupt. Uranus is a god of the sky. Uranus is Uranus messes with things that are of an electrical nature, okay? Things that would be kind of like destructive to our electrical field or electromagnetic field, that sort of thing. And going to the sign of Taurus, which Taurus is like the earth of the earth signs, and is also making this sextile aspect over here to Neptune. Okay, here we have, this is it's a rarity to have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all having this very strong connection together, all having these conversations together. These are major, major power players in astrology, okay, because they're the slowest moving of what generally people refer to as planets. I usually don't refer to them as planets because they're just not all planets. Technically, the sun and the moon are not planets. They are luminaries, but these guys are really this. I'm not surprised that there was, the hurricanes. There was a big scare with the Hurricane Milton for Florida. Thank God I have so many friends who live in Florida. I love Florida. My heart is with you, Florida. And you know, so many people had to evacuate. I'm really not surprised that sort of thing is going on, especially with the god of the sea right at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto. Turbulent times, man, for sure. Okay, but also, I'm trying to decide if I should do this. Yeah, I probably should. I talked about being careful near water because and that's what I just described as part of it. But also, here we have Saturn going through the sign of Pisces as well, which Saturn is, again, I don't want to make Saturn or Mars sound bad because we need them. Saturn is what makes us be disciplined and take care of our responsibilities. But Saturn is also very harsh. Saturn is often described to as the bringer of death, okay? And they are both the malefics, okay? Saturn is the great malefic. So Mars is called the lesser of malefics, but they're both, because Mars is like, again, planet of war. Saturn is the bringer of death. Again, I'm not trying to make Mars and Saturn sound all bad because we really do need them. Saturn is really, when somebody's got a good, strong Saturn in their natal chart, those are the people that are so ambitious and can get their work done. They're very responsible people. You can rely on them. Somebody's got a really screwed up Saturn in their natal chart. They have a very difficult time being responsible and taking care of, things that are of a mundane nature, that sort of thing. But we've got Saturn going through Pisces, water sign. The other malefic, Mars, going through Cancer, water sign. Okay, now that can be very turbulent for waters, especially considering the connection that's going on between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Okay, so I'm not surprised at all with what's been going on in the world. And not like that, but again, think about the elections that are coming up. As many of you know, I do not like to get involved in politics. I will probably make one more video about things that have potential to come out of this election, because it is fascinating to watch from an astrological from an astrological perspective for me, but maybe not for everybody. I don't like to get involved in politics at all. In my opinion, I just wish everybody would stop paying attention to politics and just take care of yourselves and your family and your neighbors. Maybe that's a little bit delusional, but that's just very much how I feel. I've completely lost my faith in the federal government, completely, entirely. That's just me. Okay, now let's talk about this optimistic grand water trine we've got going on here. So again, here's Neptune. So the beauty of Neptune going through Pisces is so mystical and so spiritual. Neptune is really what influences things like that of our psychic nature. Okay. What Neptune can do is basically put holes in our psychic boundaries. Okay. So it makes us more susceptible to picking up other people's energies. It's a very, very mystical energy that we receive from Neptune. And again, Neptune rules Pisces. Pisces is kind of considered like the mystic of the zodiac. If you look up keywords to describe the sign of Pisces, you're going to find words like spiritual. Okay, so this is deeply spiritual. It is in retrograde. So that's kind of when any of these power players, Uranus, really when anything's in retrograde, it can be almost described as aggressive, but especially when we're talking about Neptune, Uranus, or Pluto. Okay, so here's Neptune in retrograde, but again, let's be optimistic here. Here's Venus right here. Venus is the influencer of love and beauty and harmony. Okay. Venus is what she could be described as, like almost a remedy for everything. She soothes, she calms. Okay. And she's at 29 degrees Scorpio. So she's not exactly soothing and calming at this degree. 29 degrees that means it's an anoretic degree. Okay, that's kind of considered also kind of an aggressive point for any of the zodiac signs. But in the sign of Scorpio, Scorpio is so intense. Okay, that's like the key word for the sign of Scorpio is intense. Okay, so we've got Venus here at the anoretic degree of Scorpio. But it is Venus. It's Venus, and she's lovely. Okay, and she's making this very, very strong trine up here to Neptune. Okay, trine that's harmony, that's flowy. Okay, using this software, the blue lines are trines, and for the most part, create ease and flow. So it's Neptune, diffusive, Venus, flowy and lovely, and they are harmonizing together. And then we've got good old Mars over here, part of this grand water trine. So again, Mars going through Cancer. You're looking at somebody born with Mars in Cancer. In fact, Mars is going to be so close to my own natal Mars for this transit, my moon and my Mars. But it's Mars is aggressive. The sign of Cancer wants to nurture. Okay, it's a very naturally it's like the empath. Really, all the water signs are kind of born as natural empaths. But the sign of Cancer, it wants to protect. It's like the mother of the zodiac. And Mars going through Cancer can definitely influence if this is hitting something in your chart, okay? Especially if it's hitting your sun, your natal sun, or your ascendant is in the sign of Cancer. All of a sudden, you got to protect a loved one. You feel like you got to go protect your children or whoever it is, somebody who you care about. And that's always the way that I have been. Always, I'm so not confrontational. I hate confrontation until somebody that I love or care about, or somebody who just can't stand up for themselves. You better believe I'm going to step into it because that's in Cancer. Okay, but Mars is part of this grand, and we see this, it's not quite as strong as the trine that's going here from Venus and Neptune, but it's still a trine going between Venus and Mars, which could be nice in water signs. Okay, again, we're talking about natural empathy. And then we've got this trine that's going from Neptune to Mars. Okay, so that's a little bit flowy that's going on there. Okay, now let's see here. Where should we go next? I guess we probably shouldn't leave out Mercury or Jupiter. Let's talk about Mercury. Here's Mercury, ruler of our mental function and communication skills. And Mercury is how we receive messages, but also how we put the message back out. And again, the sign of Scorpio is super intense. Okay, love the sign of Scorpio, but it's fierce, it's magnetic. Okay, not only that, but the sign of Scorpio rules the genitalia with Venus at the very anoretic degree of Scorpio, and then we've also got Mercury here beaming through the sign of Scorpio. It might be kind of sexy time for some people, depends on how this is hitting your own natal chart, but with Mercury in Scorpio, there's a lot of intensity being received through the mental function. Okay, if you've got anything near 5 degrees Scorpio, be mindful of that. You might be receiving messages in a very intense way. It depends on what it is that's in your natal chart. But especially if it's your sun or your Mars and your 5 degrees Scorpio, then that's probably a lot of very intense thinking that's going on. Okay, so let's jump up to Jupiter here. So Jupiter going through Gemini all the way until June of 2025. So Jupiter is the great benefic. Okay, we talked about the malefics. Jupiter is the great benefic, beneficial energy. Jupiter is the bringer of luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy, long distance travel. Jupiter's like the professor. Okay, and the sign of Gemini is like the student. Okay, the motto for the sign of Gemini is actually I think. And I mentioned this before, I'm going to say it again. This is because Jupiter would like for us to learn about things that are natural law or common law, that sort of thing, because it's the big philosophical picture. Sign of Gemini says, we're going to focus in on all the little facts here because I'm the student. Okay, so we've got the professor in the student's house. And I mentioned this before, because I'm part of a group thread of some wonderful, beautiful friends who are all studying real law, not the silly injustice system that we've got in place. They're studying real natural law. Okay. And I absolutely love that. And especially because it's such a good time for that with Jupiter going through the sign of Gemini. Gemini is like the student, but Jupiter's kind of more like the college or the university. Okay, so we've got the professor in the student's castle hanging out for this until June of 2025. Then Jupiter moves into Cancer, and I can't wait to see how that flows through. Okay, so let's see here. I guess we kind of already talked about the North Node pumping through that sign of Aries all the way until January of 2025. And then we've got the South Node, the drain point, going through the sign of Libra until January of 2025. So if you have anything near 6 degrees Libra, it's that South Node is draining that energy out. So be mindful of that. Pay attention. If you pull up your natal chart, if you've got something near 6 degrees Libra, let's say it's Mercury near 6 degrees Libra. Again, Mercury rules are meant to function. All of a sudden, your mental function isn't as optimal as you'd like for it to be. Or on the other side of that, the North Node, pumping energy in. If you got anything near 6 degrees Aries, you've got that very strong Aries aggressive energy hitting that thing in your natal chart. Okay, so there's that. I think I covered everything I wanted to hear. And I mean, honestly, overall, it's just, you guys know I always do everything I can to relay an optimistic message and tell you guys how to work with this energy. It's just as soon as I pulled this chart up, I went, holy smokes, especially recognizing what's going on in the world, just all over the place. And so I do think it's a really good idea for us all to just be mindful and be respectful of each other and your surroundings and all sorts of things. It's so good to be able to go check on your neighbors, that sort of thing. It's a really, really good time for that because this overall is just very, very intense energy that we will all be receiving at the time of this full moon and really the days surrounding this full moon. Okay, so I will leave that there. Let's talk about body parts. Okay, so I think I already mentioned this earlier. Really, Aries rules the top of the head. Also, a little bit of the ears, a little bit of the kind of the upper jaw, but that also can be mixed in with the sign of Taurus. But it's really like the brain. Okay, the sign of Aries can also have an influence on the blood and the adrenal glands and the muscles, but it's really the top of the head, including the pineal gland. A lot of people who have a lot of strong Aries energy in their natal chart, and if you're curious for myself, so I have Venus conjunct Mercury in Aries, but I've also got my South Node in Aries. So it's a really weird blend of Aries energy for me. But I'm familiar with it. This is one of my favorite signs of the zodiac, especially since my Venus is in Aries. All you Aries out there, every time I have a reading with an Aries, I'm like, ooh, I love Aries. But it's this energy that can come off almost with a hothead kind of energy, like moon and Aries people, because the moon rules our emotions. And, people are born with moon and Aries. Sometimes they can deal with aggressive emotions, or Mars and Aries. Sometimes these people get red in the face. People are born with their sun in Aries. Sometimes they can deal with redness in the face, that sort of thing. And so with that said, some things, it's just an overall a good idea to pay attention to these parts of our body. Pay attention to again, you can also pay attention to the blood but mostly the brain, but also adrenal glands and muscles and that sort of thing. Okay. For myself, what I will be indulging in is first yarrow. Yarrow can actually help balance out the blood and that sort of thing, but it's also super protective. Yarrow is recognized as one of the most protective herbs out there. You don't even necessarily have to make it into a tea or a tincture or anything like that. You technically could just put it in a little medicine pouch and wear it around you, or put it underneath your pillow at night, that sort of thing. But I will definitely be indulging in some yarrow tea for this full moon. The next one I wanted to mention is wood betony. Wood betony can actually help calm the nerves in the brain. Okay, there's a lot of people, again, if you got Aries energy in your natal chart and this full moon's hitting that energy, you might want to consider. So I'm not a doctor and I'm not offering any kind of medical advice whatsoever. I'm talking about things that I've learned from my wonderful teachers over the years. The Academy for Astrological Medicine, as many of you know, that I've attended that school and then taught for that school. I've learned a lot. Okay, so that's where I'm getting this information from. And it's also stuff that I've tried for myself and had really good experiences with. Okay, so there's wood betony, and then also borage. Borage, I wanted to mention because borage can actually help to bring in courage. It's said to help bring courage into our body, but it also can be really good for like reviving or renewing adrenal glands. Okay, so those are the 3 herbs that I will be just sort of indulging in. I think I'll probably make a tea, like a blend of all 3 of those things for myself on the days surrounding this transit. Okay, so gemstones. The dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Aries is a diamonds. So of course, not everybody's got diamonds laying around. The only reason I have diamonds is because my grandma left them for me, and I loved her. She was a wonderful. She was an Aries. She was an Aries, and she was the sweetest lady. I always say she was literally like the typical like from a movie kind of sweet grandma. She was very, very protective of the family, but she was so sweet. And so that's the only reason that I have diamonds. But diamonds are very, very powerful. Interestingly, I don't even know why I'm mentioning this, but I gave a reading to somebody, what was it, last week, who kind of knows a little bit about gemstones and that sort of thing, more like precious gemstones, which clearly diamonds are precious gemstones. But this client was saying that she heard that she thinks the value of diamonds are going to go down next year. So isn't that interesting? I almost found it hard to believe, but I suppose it's very possible. If you do have diamonds, you might want to be mindful about it because they're so powerful. I have heard that diamonds are also very interesting because technically diamonds, with the Upaya system, diamonds are Venus's stone. So I've been trying to figure out the connection here. Why are diamonds Aries dedicated zodiacal birthstone when they're technically Venus's stone? And from my understanding, I'm going to get into some very metaphysical stuff here, but from my understanding, diamonds can actually, in essence, slow down time. And that's, it is said that, very rich, powerful people, mostly women, will wear diamonds because it keeps them youthful. Okay, that's very Venusian, that's very Venus energy, youthful and beautiful. Okay, but Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Again, it's like the infant of the zodiac. It's the pioneer of the zodiac. And so that very well could be the connection there. So if you have any diamonds, you might want to be, pulling those out for this full moon. Okay, but let's get into some protective stones here. The first one I'm going to mention is black tourmaline. Now, this is not necessarily because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put as usual, put the full extensive list of stones that resonate well with the sign of Aries below in the description. And I don't think black tourmaline is going to be on there. But where I get that list from is from a few books, but it's a lot of it comes from the Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall. Some of it also comes from just through academies that I've attended and that sort of thing. But black tourmaline, the reason I'm bringing this one out is because it's, in my opinion, like the most protective stone. And I'm talking about for everything. Okay, I have had this for so many years now. Every time I go traveling anywhere, even if it's a road trip, a plane, a boat, a ship, whatever it is, I bring my black tourmaline with me because it's my most protective stone for myself. And that's, not stuff that I'm just making up. This is stuff that I've read from multiple sources. I love black tourmaline, a super protective stone. In fact, I just gave my sister a piece of black tourmaline for her birthday. Okay, so the next one I'm going to talk about is this right here is black kyanite. This is another one that I talk about a lot because it's also super, super protective. This right here is blue kyanite. They're both super, super protective. And these can be really good to work with because they fall under as a stone that resonates well with the sign of Aries, but also with the sign of Libra. Don't forget that sun is still coming through the sign of Libra. Both of these stones are super, super protective. I'd say the difference is the blue one is kind of more protective and soothing versus this is more like, oh, I'm blocking, unwanted energies away. Okay, the other one I wanted to mention, this right here, is blood agate, which is said to be good for helping the blood, keeping the blood clean and that sort of thing. But it's also a beautiful stone, super totally Aries color. Like this is a total Aries stone. Beautiful stone and also very, very affordable. Okay, the other one I wanted to mention here is hematite. If you notice, all these stones, except for the blue kyanite, all these stones are like dark. They're all dark in color. This one I'm going to bring up next. Obsidian, okay? All of these darker stones are said to be more protective, okay? And the hematite they're protected for different reasons in different ways. And it's basically the way that I would suggest or recommend if you want to go out and get yourself more gemstones, go into a crystal shop and just see what calls to you. Just see what resonates with you. And most of these things are very affordable. And I know we're living in a time where Trust me, I know finances are hard for a lot of people right now, but especially something like this. I mean, you get something like this for like $2, you know? If you really set your mind to it, I think probably most people out there can get themselves in a position where they have an extra $2 laying around. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be working with, some serious protective crystals for this kind of transit. Now, also keep in mind, I'm not trying to make it sound like there's something terrible coming or anything like that. But overall, the energetic forces that we are receiving are pretty intense. And if you have been watching my videos for any length of time, you know I always focus on the optimistic side of things, which I'm certainly doing for this one as well. But this one's just pretty darn intense. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit erinwageastrology.com. You can schedule straight through my website. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.